hello and welcome to this video, which is the third part of a Last Epoch Beginner's Guide series. It's also the final part of the series. And in it, we're going to talk about gear itemization and crafting. So for gear itemization, we're going to be covering what kind of gear you can get, what kind of stats you'll see generally, what kind of stats you'll see on that gear, how affixes work on it, how base stats work, uniques, set pieces, all that sorts of stuff. We'll go over all of that so that you have a good idea of when things drop, what they are, what their quality is, what the chances that they're going to be an upgrade from what you already have. Then we'll go into the crafting, how to actually work on your gear, make it better, the basic systems that go into crafting so that you can have a better time with the crafting system and hopefully enjoy yourself a little bit more when you craft. I love the crafting system, so hopefully we'll really be able to cover that and give you a good idea of what you can do with the crafting system in Last Epoch. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with gear itemization. So the first thing to know is what slots there are for gear, what kind of gear you can wear. You have the headpiece, the necklace or amulet, the first weapon slot and the second weapon slot, which can also be a shield. If you have a two-hander on, you'll only have one of these slots covered. The other one will be inaccessible. The chest piece, two rings, the belt, the gloves, the boots, and the relic. The relic, by the way, is for every class, as are all of these. So every class has the same gear slots available to it. Now, there are different qualities of gear that you can get as well. First one is this white one. White gear just has base stats on it. So you can see here, this one has plus 74 melee physical damage, plus 31% chance to bleed on hit. There are no modifiers on top of that, or what we call affixes. It's just the base stats. Then when you get the blue, you'll get one or two affixes. The yellow has 3 or 4 affixes. There's also uniques. These have very specific affixes on them that change your character or the way your character plays in some specific ways you can only get on those uniques. And then finally, there are set pieces. There are only, I think, 2 sets in the game right now, but these will also have specific affixes on them, and they also have special affixes that only count if you have a certain number of the pieces on your character that you're wearing at the time. So that's basically all there is as far as quote-unquote quality. All of these are going to have their base stats, and then some of these are going to have the additional affixes on them. So let's start with base stats, and then we'll talk about affixes and how those work. Base stats are usually relative to the type of item you have on. So this particular steel axe will always have melee physical damage. It'll always have a chance to bleed on hit. This will always have melee physical damage and increased melee physical damage. Now, how good those stats are in the base is determined by 2 things. First, it's determined by the level of the item, and these items all are at a specific level. So like you'll always find this particular kind of mace requiring a level 55, but then they can roll within a certain range, better or worse as well. So this doesn't necessarily going to be a 74 or 46%. It'll always be at a particular level of quality, the level of this particular mace, around level 55 quality. But you can get a better one, you can get a worse one. It's just within whatever the range is. All right, so that's base modifiers. Base modifiers are actually really important, especially on weapons, but we're not going to get too much into that. This is just a beginner's guide. Just know that getting higher tier base items is generally good. Having that higher quality base stat is going to be really valuable, especially on particular items. Okay, now let's talk about affixes. The white one doesn't have any. The blue has, in this case, 2, could also have 1. The yellow, in this case, has 3, could have 4. But there are also prefixes and suffixes. So in particular, this axe has 2 prefixes and 1 suffix. And you can tell that by the kind of like little arrow that's on the side of this tooltip. So on the left side, there are 2 arrows, one for the increased void damage and one for the increased damage over time. On the right side, there's the one for the lightning protection. So we know that the 2 with the left arrows are a prefix, and the one with the right arrow is a suffix. Now, there's other ways of getting information on these. So if we press Alt, we can get specific data on what these affixes are doing, as well as your base stats. If we press Control, we can compare it to what we're wearing right now. If we press Control and Alt, we can get the tier level of the item. That'll come in handy during the crafting. But basically what you need to know is a higher tier item is going to have better stats. So a tier 4 will be better than the tier 3, a tier 3 better than the tier 2, and so on. There are 5 total tiers, so you want to get the higher tiers and avoid the lower tiers whenever possible, or craft up the lower tiers, which again, we'll talk about that more in the crafting section. Okay, uniques are always going to have the same affixes. Sometimes the base stats can change a little bit. That also goes for set pieces. All right, so with that, you're going to have the basic understanding of what to do as far as what you're looking at. So you want to get more affixes. Obviously, you want the affixes that are good for your class, but you can have a total of 4, 2 prefixes, 2 suffixes. So that's kind of what you're shooting for, getting the best ones, but also getting the higher tier stuff, getting the higher stats. That's going to really help. Okay, that covers the base of what you need to know as far as gear itemization. There are some other aspects that are maybe a little bit more advanced than we need to cover in a beginner's guide. Things like certain stats can only drop on certain items or be crafted onto certain items. But for the most part, you have a good understanding to get started with Last Epoch and their itemization system. It's really not that complicated. It's pretty cool. Okay, but crafting is a little bit more complicated, but not maybe as much so as you might think or be worried about, especially if you come from Path of Exile, where crafting can be pretty crazy. Like, crafting in Path of Exile is really, really hard to grasp. This game, I think, is way more intuitive about it. It doesn't have as many systems that are kind of working either together or in some cases against each other. It's got one system with some detail to it. It's a system that'll have more detail come the actual release of the game out of beta, but currently it's still got quite a bit going for it. All right, so let's dive in. Let's say you've got an item and you really like it, but you need some more stats on it. Maybe you need a specific stat on it. It's not on it, or maybe it's a low tier item. In this case, we've got a white here, so we've got nothing on it. We want to put some stuff on it. The first thing you need to know is that you have to have the affix shards of the stat that you want in order to craft on it. So how do you get affix shards? There's 2 ways, and they're both by basically just playing the game, going out and killing monsters. One is they just actually drop. You're fighting an enemy, and it drops an affix shard. The other one, and the more reliable one as far as getting the items that you want, is to use what's called a Rune of Shattering on an item that's already got the stats that you want. So, let's say I needed increased void damage. Not on this axe, but something else. This axe happens to have increased void damage. So, what I do is I throw this axe in here. I throw in a Rune of Shattering into the modifier. We'll talk about runes specifically and how they all work in a minute. But we'll throw this in there, and we're going to press Shatter. And it's going to tell us what we got. We got a Void Damage Shard, a Damage Over Time Shard, and a Lightning Protection Shard. So that added to my Void Damage stack. I have 27 in this case, but if I had none in there and I did that, now I can actually craft Void Damage. So I go in to my Steel Axe, I pop it in there. I'm going to type in Void Damage, there it is. I click on this, and I click Forge. And now there's a tier 1 Void Damage on there. And if I need more Void Damage, I can just continue the process, and hopefully this works. There it is, tier 2. So that's how I can start to build up the stats. I can start to build up the stats that I need on my items. But there's a really important feature that you need to know as you're crafting, because crafting doesn't come without risks. So if I press Alt on this, I see towards the top in orange something called instability. And mine is currently at 10. Instability is added to an item when you're crafting. So as I craft on, in this particular case, as I craft on Void Damage, you'll see that my instability is increasing. But you also see that my chance for success here is dropping. I had 80% chance on the last one, now I have 70% chance. What happens is as instability increases, the chance of success drops, and the chance for fractures increases. Now, fractures in this game are the risk that you take when you continue to craft on an item. So this particular item now, with all the crafting I've done on it, has a 25% chance for a minor fracture and a 5% chance for a damaging fracture. Now, there are 3 tiers of fractures that you can get. The more instability you have, the greater the chance of the fractures. The minor fracture is just going to make it so I cannot craft on the item anymore. The damaging fracture is going to actually cause damage to the stats on the item, as well as prevent me from being able to craft it anymore. And then there's a higher tier fracture. I don't remember the name of it, but that one will do even more damage. And I believe it's possible for that one to completely wipe the stats on the item. So that can get pretty risky if you start seeing that show up in this bar down here, where you see the even higher tier fracture. Once you see the damaging fracture, you're starting to take some risks, because you can actually do harm to the item. But that's the risk reward of this system. Now, there are ways to mitigate that risk. So, for example, this is where we're going to talk about these crafting materials over here. Let's throw in this barbed mace here, the rending barbed mace of hunger, which already has melee damage and health on hit, but it doesn't have void damage, and I'm apparently building a void damage character as far as our example here. So there's a couple of things I can do. Now, like I said, when you craft on these, it adds instability. In this case, I'm going to add 5 instability if I craft on this, and I'll have a 94% chance for success. The 5 instability is pretty significant, but I can lower that. One thing I can do here is I can add a glyph of stability. These drop from monsters just like the other items in here. They all drop off of monsters, or they come from chests, rewards, whatever it might be. And I can throw this in here, and what it does is it reduces the instability that's added by crafting by up to 60%. So I pop this in there, and it goes from saying we'll add 5 instability to now we'll add 2 to 5 instability. So let's see what happens. We've currently got 6 instability on it. We forge void damage. We've now got 10 instability, so it added 4 instability to that. So if I didn't use my glyph of stability, I would have put 5 on it. So I actually only put 4. It wasn't a great mitigation, but it was a little bit. All right, let's see. I want to keep crafting on this. I've got this 85% chance and a 15% chance for a minor fracture. Now I have a couple options here. I could take the risk. 85% seems like a pretty good odds to me. But let's say I really don't want to risk it. Let's say I need this item to just get a couple more tiers, and then I'm done with anyway. So I just want to make sure I get there. There's this item called the Glyph of the Guardian. And what it does is it completely mitigates a minor fracture, reduces a damaging fracture to a minor fracture, or a destructive fracture, which is the highest tier fracture, to a damaging fracture. So depending on what the risks here are, so 15% chance for minor fracture, I throw in Glyph of the Guardian, now it's 100% chance. It mitigates the minor fracture. Now, what if I've got an item that's got a damaging fracture on it? As this tooltip told us, it's going to drop that to a minor fracture. So what we should see here when we drop a Glyph of the Guardian in for this particular item, which has higher instability, is the 25% chance for minor fracture will be gone, and the 5% chance for damaging fracture should become a minor fracture chance. And we throw the Glyph of the Guardian, and that's exactly what happens. So Glyph of the Guardian is a really good way to prevent yourself from taking as much risk as you otherwise would. In some cases, completely mitigating risk. Just remember, the Glyph of the Guardian doesn't do anything about the instability. So right now we have 10 instability on it. We do the forge. We got 15 instability. As you can see, we went from 15% chance for a minor fracture before to a 25% chance. Now we can still Glyph the Guardian, and we're going to get 100% chance because we had no minor fracture chance in there, but we're at another 5 instability, excuse me. But now we're at 65% chance, 25% chance for minor fracture, and 10% chance for damaging fracture. So we're up to tier 3 on this void damage, but we're continuously increasing our instability. We're up to 20 now. We can try to throw another glyph. But now we've only got 90% chance for success and 10% chance for minor fracture. And that's because we had the 10% chance for damaging fracture, which got dropped down to a minor fracture. So I continue to craft. All right, now we're at tier 4, but we're at 55% chance of success, 25% chance of minor fracture, 20 damaging. Go again. 20% chance to minor fracture. Now it's getting a little bit more risky, at least as far as we're running out of chances to potentially craft on this. If we hit the fracture now, we'll be done. We forge again. We got lucky. We're at tier 5. So we're done with the void damage. We've gone as far as we can go, or at least it would seem so. But let's see what the tier is for this. So we got 130% increased void damage. We know what the tier is, but is 137% as much as we can get? Well, let's look. If we do Control-Alt, we can see that there's a range of tier 5 increased void damage from 103% to 162%. Well, what if we want to go try to get the 162%? Can we do that? And the answer is yes, we can. And we can do that with a Rune of Refinement, which rerolls all affixes on an item within their tier, but adds instability. So we want to get the 162%. We pop this in. Notice we can still fracture when we're doing this, and we're going to add a little bit of instability. In this case, only 2, so it's not as much. But if we really, really, really want to get to like 150, 160% increased void damage, we can try. We can try to do that. 70% chance for success. Let's see what happens. 137% increased void damage. We try to refine it. We do. But unfortunately, we dropped it to 120% increased. Let's keep trying just to show you what it looks like when you fracture. We're at 68% chance success. We got lucky again. We're back to 132% increased void damage. So we've used 2 of these runes of refinement, and we're back to where we started. That's just the risk of crafting. Try it again. Somehow we haven't broke this yet. That's good. We're getting really lucky, but we're not getting the higher rolls we want. Only 127% here. Try it again, and there it is. Now we fractured the item. So now we're done crafting on this. But we did get the 127% increased void damage. We did pretty good for ourselves overall as far as what our goals were. Okay, so that's the gist of crafting. If you understand what I just did there, then you understand most of the details of it. The other things to know are what can be crafted on an item, but you can learn that through experience, and also prefix and suffix. When you're looking at an item, let's see here, let's say we got void damage on this one. We decide to add another prefix. Please don't break on me. Didn't break. All right, so now we've got 2 prefixes. We can only craft suffixes now because we've already got our 2 prefixes. So you can see that all the prefixes are grayed out. The suffixes are all that's left. Other things that we have in here, rune removal. So this is a nice little piece as far as getting, let's say we didn't want that health damage leech, and we want to get rid of that. We can use a rune of removal, and we're going to get one of those affixes off, but not both, and it's going to be random which one. So we do it, and we got lucky. The one we wanted off is off, but we add instability to it. So this is even more unstable than it was before. Higher chance it's going to fracture as we continue to craft on it. Another option, Rune of Cleansing, removes all affixes from an item and reduces instability to between 5 and 15. This can be really useful if you've got a really good base item and the stats aren't good on it, or the crafting hasn't went as you wanted it to for some reason, and you don't want to take any more risks on it. You want to try again. You pop this in. Right now our instability is at 22, and we've got the void damage on it. We do this. The void damage is gone, and we're down to 13 instability. And that's the gist of the crafting system right now. I think it's really cool. It's relatively intuitive. You can make some pretty powerful items, but there is risk on it. I think that's a really good way of handling it, and I really enjoy how Last Epoch does it. So that covers it. That's the crafting system. That's the itemization system. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments. Stop by on Twitch. We'd love to have you as part of our community on Twitch. It's a really lively, growing, fun community, and I'm on 6 days a week. If you like this video, please drop it a like. If you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos in Last Epoch, including some build guides. I'm really looking forward to putting those up and seeing what you all think about it. Thank you so much. I really hope you enjoy your time in Last Epoch, and see you soon.